Hey, Rigsby here again with today's episode of the Fitness Business School, and I am here with my good friend, Bill Hartman. Now, you may know Bill from the iFast gym stuff for years and years and years, or now the United Health and Performance Continuum model. But I know Bill all the way back to Bill and I did a Fitness Riches book. We collaborated on this thing in
Oh
2006.
my gosh, was it that's like forever. Oh my God.
So I
Oh
get
man.
way, way back with Bill, and I've learned a great deal. Bill has solved so many of my physical problems, and it's just been a great journey to watch his evolution as a practitioner and expert. So I figured I'd have you on today, Bill, and just kind of talk through it.
Hey, can I tell everybody where I first heard of you?
Please.
Because I remember this very distinctly, and you'll remember this too. Eric Ruth
Yep.
was hitting the marketing thing pretty hard for the fitness industry, and he needed an expert. And so he brought you in, and I bet you I still have it on CD.
The personal training money machine. Yeah.
Is that what it was? Because it was like, and again, yeah, took totally my first exposure for you. But also the cool thing about that I loved was that you were a baseball coach, and then you got into the fitness thing, and then you constructed one of the coolest business models of all time that I think is still underappreciated, where everybody lives on the hour kind of a thing. And then you were the guy that goes, well, wait a minute. It's like there's a whole bunch of stuff where I'm just standing here watching people do things that they could just do on their own. So you had people come in, they did their stuff on their own, and then you did like the intensive 30-minute sessions, and immediately profitability goes up. So that was one of those cool things that just like, okay, I don't have to follow what everybody else is doing. Like Pat's kind of on it, and it was kind of neat. But that sticks in my head. It's like that was the first time that I saw somebody like take what everybody else is doing and going, oh, there's a better way to do this. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that was one of the great things about entering the industry in maybe a non-traditional way was I didn't get bogged down with the dogma stuff and
Right.
everything. And that seems like a pretty cool segue to watching you because I came to know you as a physical therapist, but
Right.
like many professions, there's kind of a standard way they do it, and then there's
Uh-huh.
this kind of evolved path you take. And so
Right.
I don't know a better way to unpack it than to just say, how has that happened?
35 years. How about that? It's literally 35 years. I would have to say that so there's been, I think everybody has these little milestones in their career where they feel something or they recognize something. And I've had many of those where I can distinctly remember driving home early on, and I'm treating people, right? Early in my career, like let's say the first 5 to 10 years, and I have some representation of what I think I'm doing, and I think this is how stuff works, and based on what I think I know, this is what I'm doing. And then you have this moment of realization that I really don't know what I'm doing. Right? I'm just doing stuff. And if I do enough stuff, people tend to get better, right? But there's a lot of people that didn't. There was a lot of people that I honorable intentions. Like I want to help you, I want to do everything that I can for you, but I just don't know enough. And that becomes this underlying driving force for everything. And so then you go diving into a direction, right? You say, oh, this is novel. This is interesting. This is different from what I've done. Well, what's their perspective? And you sort of absorb that, right? And then you say, well, I'm going to do this. And then you get good at that for a while. And then you have the drive home. You're banging your head on the steering wheel. You're going, why don't I know what this means? Why don't I know really what to do? Why isn't there something that's going to provide me clarity? And then you go to the next thing, next layer on. Okay. You exhaust that. And then you go, okay, hit another wall. There's obviously something else that I need to know. And you just do this, and you do this over time. But this is how you get better at what you do. Now, there are people, unfortunately, that can go through the same 35 years that I just did and they never ask that question,
Yeah.
right? They're unconcerned because they are either satisfied with what they are doing, what they think they understand, if they're satisfied with it. And here's the unfortunate circumstance, they're being rewarded for that,
Yeah.
right? So these are the people that get paid just to show up, basically, right?
Yeah.
You know,
I
go
think
ahead.
I've always thought of this through this lens of there are people who think their job is to do the thing, not to create the outcome.
Yeah.
And that, but from the other side, I know how I've approached it. And I know that when I would watch, like even dating back when I was a baseball coach, it would drive me crazy. Like, how did we not get better? How did we not win? And I would keep looking for ways to improve. And I'd say, how do these guys go like 15 and 25 every year and just be at peace with that? And circumstances are what they are, and maybe that has something to do with it. But sometimes it's just, it's a paycheck. My job is to show up, run practice, take people to the
Right.
games, whatever.
Yeah.
But what's been really neat for me is because of the way that I have consistently like screwed myself up physically, I've got to come and witness the evolution of how you have gone about solving problems and deriving outcomes. I mean, we talked about it when I saw you last week.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember probably, I'm going to say it had to be 2008, 2009, and the latest. You performed active release technique on me. And then I've been with you resolving all the things that I mess up coaching baseball or trying to lift or whatever else. And you've gone about solving what in my mind seemed like somewhat similar problems that I keep creating in
Mhm.
just a continually evolving way.
Yeah. Well, again, it goes back to the same question. And it's not like any manual technique isn't useful. It just becomes a stronger representation of the how, why, where, and when to use it, right? So I will give you for instance. I was managing two clinics at one point, and we participated in a nationwide system of tracking outcomes. So duration, like diagnosis, duration of symptoms, level of what they would consider functionality. It's like, what are they capable of doing? Right. And then, again, nationwide. And my clinic was rated third in the country. Okay. For duration. So I think at one point we had like 11, we had, regardless of diagnosis, we got them done in 3.5 visits in 11 days, which is pretty good, which is pretty good. Right. But as far as approach goes, I was manual therapying people to death. My exercise selection was probably less than ideal, right? Treating a lot of symptoms and doing well, but still having that undertone of like, do I really know what I'm doing? And am I really being effective? Or am I just getting like this population of people that just get better really fast, right? No matter what you do. And so not giving myself any credit for that. Again, it's like it's still representative of good outcomes, like really good outcomes. And but always having that question in my mind is like, is there a better way? And now, like the thing that is represented now in the way that I do things is my understanding of my layers of understanding has grown. And therefore, all of the things that I have done in the past now have greater meaning. And that's what I think you're recognizing is the fact that the amount of negative probabilistic calculation, right? The stuff that's against me is a lot less than it used to be. So like if like I'll just throw numbers, like let's just say I'm 87% accurate compared to 13% inaccurate, whereas before it was like kind of flip-flopped and I was just dropping, like I was just doing so many things that was probably incoherent, but I did enough things that I was effective, right? Which again, as long as your outcomes are good, who cares, right? Except internally, I couldn't live with that. I had to just keep evolving. So I had to
Well,
find the
and,
next thing next time, right?
well, and if I look at the people that I have been able to study or get to know in this industry or even beyond, I mean, there's that sense of urgency, that desire to continually improve. They're not necessarily just driven by the common stuff, like, oh, I just have to pay the mortgage, I just have to fund my retirement, whatever else. They're a big part of who they are is this, I want to keep getting better, I want to keep pushing. And so I think there's a pretty important lesson there. If somebody, it doesn't matter if they want to do what I do, if they want to do what you do, if they want to do what Mike does, it doesn't matter. Like, that's the way. It
Yeah.
like,
Well,
so
and I think the sense of urgency, but with an element of patience,
yes,
right? And I think the problem is that there's always going to be those people that have the same sense of urgency, but the impatience.
I think of that as like desperation.
Maybe it's like the thing about it is like if you persist, that's where all of this kind of allows this level of an outcome, right? Most people, again, every generation blames the younger generation for not having that patience and wanting to go too fast, right? And so now I get to be the old guy and I get to go, oh, the kids today, what they see this evolved product and they go, that's what I want to do. And then they say, well, what's the shortest path? It's like, oh, all I got to do is become famous or gain attention versus actually getting really good at what you do first.
Yeah,
And so again, they don't understand the evolution of the product because everybody wants stuff now. And then of course, if you promise that's what sells, right?
yeah.
And
So
so it's hard to overcome that.
so I want to go back and maybe trace back to a little bit of this early kind of, at least my early knowledge of you. So there was a golf performance type of thing that I knew about. Very early on in our relationship, I mean, I remember like it was yesterday going and meeting you and Mike at a Starbucks, talking about the future of iFast. Like iFast was going to come to fruition. So you've always been, isn't just rehab. There's more. There's a performance element. So talk about how you kind of commingled those two, or what got you interested in both sides of that from the beginning.
Well, I think everybody that had any measure of athleticism, right, and was able to demonstrate that sort of beyond the like the high school level, I think that there's an element of that because especially when you're incredibly average, like as an athlete is concerned, and you're like just good enough, like you're sort of like you're good enough in high school that people kind of recognize you, and then you go like one step up, which was like, okay, so I played Division III football for a couple of years. I threw javelin in college, and there you're always looking for an edge, a reason, a way, like some way to get better because again, you're like you're just good enough to incentivize you to keep going and then but you suck so bad that you're just never going to be good. And so you're always looking for ways to get better. And then but through that you discover it's like, oh, I'm starting to understand how this actually works. I could show somebody else how to do this. And then that becomes interesting. It's like, so somebody comes to you and then they say, oh, I'm working on this. And you go, oh, I have an idea. Well, let's do this. And then you get a measure of success and you say, oh, okay. So there's an incentive to understand that side of things, having been an athlete. And so that's always been the undertone, always been because I went to physical therapy school by default. I was studying exercise physiology in a master's program, and all I was doing, I was a lab rat. I was just sitting there in the lab for how many hours a day, just driving myself crazy, having to write papers, doing research for the PhDs. And it's like, okay, this is a dead end. And so I applied to PT school and got in because it just seemed like, okay, it's movement. It's some way to sort of continue in this path, right? And then that gets interesting because now those are bigger problems potentially that you're dealing with. And so after a while, there's this overlap that you start to see from foundational representations of movement and things like that. And so then there's the association. And so then it becomes really hard to separate at that point. It's just, and again, just as you evolve as a practitioner, that perspective starts to evolve where you can start to see, you see the commonalities and you see the separate nature of things as far as rehab versus the performance related training. So it's always been there. And then it was just a matter of like, I look at Mike as sort of like a mirror of me, where it's like, okay, so I evolve from the rehab and performance side, and Mike is evolved from the performance and rehab side. So he started off, and he got a lot of exposure in rehab early on in his career because of the jobs that he took that sort of built layers upon him because he was a performance guy. Then he had to start to learn how to do rehab. I was more of the rehab guy, and then superimposed the performance. That's one of the reasons why I think that we've always gotten along is like we can cross over between. It's like I don't have to give Mike like a lot of information when we're working with the same athlete. I say, oh, he's got this and this, and Mike goes, okay, so we're going to do this and this. And I go, yeah, that's exactly right. Right. So there's always been that sort of mirror there. But as far as marrying the two, I think the better you get at anything, you start to realize it's like the process that someone would go through, like after an injury or whatever, is very similar in process to anything else. In fact, I'm kind of the guy, like I have a buddy that coined the term Hartman's razor, which basically just means that I see everything as the same. And so I do, right? Everything that you do is training and then reinforcement of something, right? So if you want to get up early in the morning, you get up early in the morning, you don't hit the snooze, because every time you hit the snooze, you're training yourself to hit the snooze, right? So everything that you do becomes training. If you delay your ability to sit down and do your work, then you're training yourself to learn how to delay, right? And so from a learning perspective, from a coaching perspective, it's like everything that you're doing, understand that you're reinforcing something, whether you're doing it intentionally or not. And the idea is to recognize this fact and then continue to apply the concept of like, oh, I need to train myself to be able to do this. Like for us to have this conversation, it's like you can actually get better at this,
No,
right? If you choose to, right? So I don't know if I went off too far off on a tangent there, but it's
that's
kind of where my
good.
head
So
went.
your professional like career path started out employee, then kind of commingle employee and owner, and then owner, and then now, and then it was owner slash teacher. Then now it's evolved to pretty much exclusively
Yeah.
teaching other professionals. So it's
Yeah.
kind of been that one overlap, the other overlap. So walk us through that a little bit, because I want to arrive at what you're doing today, because I think it's both fascinating and it's about time. So
Yeah. Okay. So there's two kinds of teachers. There's the teachers that teach what is already considered pre-existing and prolific, and then there's the teacher that evolves something over time that takes it a step farther and says, look, this is novel, this is unique, this is a different perspective, this is building upon everything that we've had before. And so if you want to be the first kind of teacher, those are the people that we see in school,
yeah,
right? They're taking what has already pre-existed, what is already accepted as foundational, and they are just repeating. It is not a representation necessarily of depth of understanding. It is just repetition. It is like, okay, we've always done it this way. Here's how we do it. Okay. And that's okay because there's value in much of that. And we need those types of teachers because we have to have something to build upon in the first place. And so we need that. But at the other end of the spectrum, there is this evolution that we've been talking about this whole time. It's like we have to have something better, right? It's like, so you go like there's the guy that leads the path through the jungle, right? And makes the path for everybody else for them to follow. And then he eventually tops out, and then the next guy takes it, and so on and so forth. And so that's the other kind of teacher. And that's what I'm hoping that I'm doing now. But to get to there, you have to go through all of these representations of knowledge, experience, etc. Right? And so, well, how do you gain experience? Well, if you're dangerous because you don't know anything, so then you work with other people, you work under mentors and such, and then you borrow what those people do, and that's you sort of internalize that, and then you sort of mix it up into your own thing, right? And then you take the next step where you have some measurement of leadership where there's still people that are ahead of you, but now there's people behind you, and you start dumping that information in hopefully in the right direction. All right. And then there's another level of leadership where you have more people that are sort of behind you, fewer people that are ahead of you, right? That you can still glean information from. And then there's the point where you sort of meet everybody else and you go, okay, I know this kind of stuff, or at least I think I know this kind of stuff. And then, but there's still something else that I need to interpret from my perspective that nobody else can offer. And then, so that's kind of where we are now with the network thing is like, okay, this is my attempt to go to the next step, right or wrong, right or wrong. You got to hang your ass out there, right? You do. Like you're taking risk because I always say evidence is in the outcome. And it's like, so the stuff that I'm doing now is literally my experience having done all of this other stuff, like taking it into consideration, saying this might be useful, this is not, cast it aside. This is useful, this is not, cast it aside. If I'm casting this aside and I'm saying that this is useful, then how do I use this now? Like, what is the next step? And so that's where you are. But you got to go through all this other stuff, right? Because you're a young skull full of mush when you start, and you are literally dangerous. Like they give somebody a license to take someone else's health into their care, and they don't know anything. And the reason I know they don't know anything, because I had 25 consecutive students over 8 years, and I know what they knew, and I was their last guy before they got released into the population, right? So I know what they knew, and I know how dangerous they are, right? Did our best to raise their game. But the reality is they just don't have any experience to superimpose when they get stuck in a situation, right? So that's kind of how we get here, right? And am attempting, right? I'm always attempting. It's like, what's the next thing that I need to know? What would make a difference? And just keep pushing. And then I will hit an impasse at some point in time. I will get tired, right? And then, but the path that I'm hopefully clearing for someone gives them the ability to get ahead of where I am. And that's how we all get better.
Well said. So let's talk about this in a practical sense. I mean, you've run the intensive many times over now. We're into the mid-20s now. Is that
Yeah, it's 24 is going to be in this summer.
so? You've done hands-on work that way. You've had interns, some of whom I've gotten to know, but now there's this broader way that people can get exposure to you. It's not, hey, I have to be in Indianapolis, or maybe I have to go to, I think you just did one at Cressy's
Yes. Yeah, just
recently,
yeah.
or I have to go intern there. Now there's a network
Yes.
where there is coursework, curriculum people can
Uh-huh.
follow. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So this is the home base. This is the official home base now. It's like, so everything is sort of come from all different directions. And it was time that was necessary that we have some place to work from, so to speak. And so Chris Wykus is my partner in this. And what we did is we just brought all of the resources into a singular place. And so we created the Unified Health and Performance Continuum Model Network. So it's UHP network. And so this is where I spend most of my day. We have, and again, there's like different levels of access kind of a thing. So we have the free stuff. We got like, I think there's 3 free courses up there that you can take. There's an infinite amount of free information on there that will take you weeks and weeks to go through. And then we have the next level, which is direct access to question and answers. So we have live office hours, like we just did that yesterday. So that's an hour of direct Q&A. My Coffee and Coaches Conference calls that are Thursday mornings are now part of that network. We're in the midst of doing a live online principles and concepts course, which literally lays out the entire foundation of my model over a period of 8 weeks. So we're just past the halfway point there. But like I said, it was necessary at this point because number one, apparently you got to name stuff to protect it. I didn't know that. So we had to give it a name because I was just calling it my model because that's what I've always made reference to it. But in this construction, the cool thing about this is, and this is what people don't, what I think they don't recognize about actually getting better, is like you get to a point where you're sort of topping out And then one of the reasons is because you don't know what questions to ask anymore.
Yeah.
And so the advantage that I have is that I have thousands of people now that have access to the information. They start to formulate their own questions that I would never have considered asking myself, right? And that gives an advantage is that the evolution of the UHPC model in the last, so I think we're coming up on our first anniversary of this thing being live, and can't tell you how evolved things have become, it not so much in the foundations, but in the way that I can express this information, because I've had to answer so many questions in different ways that the answers get better, the clarity improves. And so, that I again, thanks to Chris, because there's no way I could pull this off technically. I think you probably understand that like this is the highlight of my technical expertise right here, is that I can actually do a Zoom call. But more people talk about it, more people share it, which is great. But it's like just having the home base, and it has been the best thing that I've ever done as far as my career goes, because again, it just gives me the opportunity to provide a direction that has not been examined before. And it's like, then the next guys can try to take it farther if they can. Good luck with that, because I'm not dead yet.
So, so quick side note, hopefully everybody kind of picked that up that, okay, Bill gets help on the things that are not Bill's stuff. Just like Paul is sitting over here
Yes.
behind the screen.
Yes. You,
Essentially, this is the extent of my efficiency as well.
yes.
But I mean, it allows you to go deeper on the
Yes.
things that are your strengths and interests.
Yeah.
So,
Without question. Without question. Like it's like I have been lucky to have two of the best business partners that you can imagine, in Mike Robertson in the brick and mortar stuff, and then with Chris with the network. It's like can't thank them enough, because it's been spectacular in all cases.
so who is the right person to go, and this is probably a loaded question, right? To go and join the network and come and learn what you guys are doing there in this kind of blend of health and performance.
Well, number one, it's got to be somebody that wants more, recognizes that they need more than what they're already doing. Because we talked about levels earlier, and it's like with every layer of understanding or experience that you get, you go, oh, this is it. This is the one, right? And if you stop there, then don't go. Trust me, don't go. Because there's got to be a work ethic that comes behind it if you're going to participate in this, because it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be a struggle, because the one of the goals of the model itself is to create a model that is coherent, that is absolutely consistent, which is, again, we go back to the Hartman's razor concept. Didn't coin it myself, but I'm going to steal that for the rest of my life. When we start to see everything is the same, it's like you have to be able to accept those things, right? The minute you say, okay, this is the last thing that I need to do, and then you're going to stagnate, and it might be okay. Maybe it's a high enough level, but if you constantly want to push, because Chris and I were having a conversation on Tuesday, and he's like, since because we were talking about the anniversary, and he goes, man, he goes, even the language has evolved in the last year, just the way that we talk about stuff. And it's like, yeah, it's because we got to keep pushing the envelope. Like we cannot rest, and we can't say that this is it. And one of the things, like I'll make like a social media post or something like that after an intensive or whatever, and I always make the statement, it's like the model evolves, right? Because I get different people in the room, and then you get those questions again, and then the expression changes, and then clarity improve. Like the way that I can see things now compared to, what I think 2018, I think was the first intensive, I think. And the way that I see it now, I don't want to say it's totally different, like the foundations are the same, but it's like the expression is just so much bigger. And so if you want to participate in that, you have to have that attitude. You have to, like, it's not just about, oh, I need something new. It's like, I need something next. Right. And then the cool thing about this is like we're not resting on laurels here. We are pushing this to make it better and better, and provide more examples, more clarity, more content. And so if you've got a work ethic and you want to continue to evolve, this would be the place.
Wonderful. So just so it feels very practical. I mean,
Yeah. We have homework and everything. I'm not kidding. It's like there's an assignment every week. Yeah, it's not school, but it is because school's boring. Nobody wants to do that. But it is a constant challenge to keep up.
and it's perfectly acceptable for somebody to come from the rehab side or the
Mhm.
performance side and kind of close the gap on the other.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, we have a crazy mix. We have a crazy mix of people. We have just like enthusiasts. There are people that want their exercise programs to evolve, and they to do that themselves, they need a bigger understanding. We actually have people that like they are not working professionally in this, but they are digging in, and it's remarkable. It's remarkable how far people are willing to go. It's really neat to see.
Very cool. So where can people find the network? Where can they find more of Bill to do a
Yeah.
deep dive on all this?
UHP.network. How convenient. Yeah, just go to UHP.network. Like I said, there's so much free content up there. Every quarter, we update the free content. So there's webinars up there, articles galore. Like I said, we got 2 courses that everybody goes through that wants to continue to participate. So if you want to get to the next level where you have more direct access to me on a weekly basis, you got to go through this stuff because we need people that establish a foundation of understanding first. But yeah, UHP.network for just about everything. Obviously, I'm on Instagram and Bill underscore Hartman underscore PT, I think. I don't know. I don't pay attention. And then at Bill Hartman PT, there's like almost 900 videos up on the YouTubes. And then Chris and I do the Reconsider podcast every 2 weeks. So that's topical. And then there's more information on that podcast that would show up on the network each week as well.
Very good. Well, we'll make sure that we link out to all of that. Make a note of that, Paul. And we
I love Paul. It's just like, what would we do without him?
exactly. I have asked that question for 15 years and I'm afraid of the answer. So,
Don't get cocky, Paul.
all right. Well, Bill, thank you so much for coming and hanging out this morning. And I look forward to not only continuing to learn a little bit myself about some of this fun stuff, but also connect some of these professionals that I get to enjoy working with you to give them something better to offer. So thank you.
You've always been tremendously helpful to me and obviously IFAST. And so can't thank you and can't appreciate you enough.
Well, thank you. And that was another episode of the Fitness Business School with Pat and Bill signing off.